Hello and welcome to this special edition dedicated to the EMRC Forum on agribusiness. Our main topic will be agriculture in Africa and how to get the private sector more involved in it. This EMRC Forum took place in Johannesburg, South Africa, a few weeks ago and was a great occasion to see businessmen and farmers think about what to do to improve the professionalization of African agriculture. Partners from the UN Development Programme and the Food and Agriculture Organization were also among the main guests in the forum. Altogether, they came to the conclusion that with a better long-range planning and more investments from the private sector, there is no way Africa cannot feed itself. The AgriBusiness Forum most prestigious guest was Morgan Tsvangirai, the Prime Minister of Zimbabwe. It was a clearly perfect occasion for him to unveil Zimbabwe's project to open up to foreign and private investments. Morgan Tsvangirai agreed to give Voxafrica a special interview. He first denied the allegations about forced nationalization of lands in his country.
People who are participating in any indigenization arrangement, they have to pay for the value. It's not for free. Secondly, we don't believe in that this is a nationalization or an expropriation policy. And thirdly, it has been mutually agreed between the partners that on the various sectors that are there, that there has to be a minimum threshold that has already been identified, that is already in ongoing discussion. The identification of partners has to be voluntary. It is a voluntary exercise. So it cannot be in any manner be compared with the land invasions, which was anyone grabbing whatever they wanted. So this one is much more orderly and much more legal.
The Prime Minister also mentioned the organization of next election in Zimbabwe and the transition to a more sustainable political system in the country. Mr. Tsvangirai hopes the new political situation will help the Zimbabwean economy.
Well, I think that across the political divide, if you ask every Zimbabwean whether we want to slide back to where we were in 2007, 2008, they will say definitely not. And every Zimbabwean realizes that the transition by the inclusive government has brought more benefits to Zimbabweans. That's why this government has 85% support, because we have resolved some of the major critical issues: economic stabilization, social delivery. Of course, it's not a perfect arrangement, but I think it has worked. It has worked to stabilize the situation. Now, coming to this conference means, therefore, that we are now emerging from a transition. In the next year, we will be going to an election. And, of course, people are beginning to feel confident about the future of Zimbabwe. There is light at the end of the tunnel. There's more stability, there's more predictability, and I think that the political situation will be resolved by a free and fair and legitimate election.
Morgan Tsvangirai also wanted to make it clear that Zimbabwe is now welcoming any form of foreign investments in its agriculture as well as other sectors of the economy.
Whenever you invest in any activity, you get value for money. Where have you seen such a highly productive, educated workforce that is able to commit itself to it? So I think that the country risk sometimes is exaggerated. When they see Mugabe, they see hell, and they say, oh, we will not go there. But that's the past. Even Mugabe accepts. The protection of investment is the future. So I think the country risk is being exaggerated.
The NGO EMRC is organizing the forum every year. Its mission is to develop the private sector in Africa in order to boost sustainable and responsible development and growth on the continent. They intend to do so by growing cross- and intra-continental business partnerships with and between public and private sectors. Listen to EMRC Managing Director and Vice President, Mrs. Edith Miller. She said she met numerous business people interested in developing partnerships in Zimbabwe, for instance.
People are looking for good opportunities. Yeah. You know, people have the money, people have the capacity, and they're looking for good opportunities. And I think that Zimbabwe is one of the countries, certainly not the only one in Africa, but Africa as a whole, and Zimbabwe as a kind of example in Africa, as a plenty of opportunities to invest and to make more business and to develop more projects. And this is why we're all here.
Morgan Tsvangirai concluded by assuring that the time frame was almost in place to organize the elections next year in Zimbabwe.
Well, there is a process taking place which SADC has already outlined in a roadmap. The constitution has to be completed, a referendum has to be undertaken, and once that is done, a date of election is then set. Well, my estimate is that given the current process, I don't foresee us having an election the first half of next year, maybe the third quarter of next year.
Among the other eminent guests at the forum was Moussa Seck, currently the interim chair of PANAC, the Pan-African Agribusiness and Agro-Industry Consortium. He is a renowned expert in the field of agriculture science and planning. He is, among other things, the architect of Senegal's national policy on agriculture, known as Sénégal Agricole, and pioneered the concept of agropoles, a word he coined in 1989. Moussa Seck is now based in Nairobi, and he really wanted to be there for the AgriBusiness Forum in Johannesburg.
In Africa, we just realized that most of the food production was done by the small farmers, which is very, very important, which is great. But in order to really meet the demand of the continent in the next 25 years, we just needed the engagement of the private sector, who are bringing technology, money, strategies in order to increase rapidly the food production.
Mr. Moussa Seck is therefore very hopeful for the future of agriculture in Africa. Listen to his arguments.
You can grow all kind of food without any exception. But when you are divided exactly in two hemispheres by the equator, you can grow all those kind of food twice a year. So knowing that you have this potential, we're asking now a question: why are we facing hunger? Because first we have to know, but we have to articulate and coordinate. We have to coordinate among bands, agroclimatic zones. We have to coordinate between hemispheres, the hemisphere north and the hemisphere south. So this is what PANAC is bringing to our governments, because we know by the end of the day, our governments, our multilateral institutions will not go into farming. And today, the lesson learned is showing that the small farmer will not make it for the next 25 years in order to meet our demand of 1.5 billion tons. So the private sector had to play the role.
And this is mainly because he believes African farmers can move from a small-scale model to a more private-oriented business model.
Agriculture is a business of small farmers. We always thought that. And now, 50 years after independence, almost except Nigeria, no country in the continent is just meeting the food demand. The second thing is that we never thought that the private sector should be involved into food production. Yet, private sector should be everywhere. And it was just like we were saying this morning. Africa is importing maybe 20, 30, 40% of the food that it needs. People are saying we have many different figures. But we're saying that what we are importing is less than the fact that people, instead of going for the need to eat, will just stay without eating. Yeah. So the privation is more important than what we are importing. So we have a hidden hunger in the entire continent. Since, for example, in many countries, people spend most of their time looking for food daily. And this is the issue. So we have never thought that the private sector should be playing a leading role in the production. That's why, for example, they are missing. We have to rebuild it. We have to reconstitute it. We have to talk to UNDP, to the World Bank, to all those institutions that the target is the private sector. Because the private sector will do it fast, will do it better, and will do it bigger.
And to reinforce his arguments, Moussa Seck describes the kind of conceptual revolution he thinks is already happening on the continent.
I have to recall this meeting we had in Paris in 1998 about how to feed the world in year 2050. Because in year 2050, the experts and scientists think that the world population will double. I don't think so. But when the world population doubles, we don't need to double cars right away or cell phones. But food must be doubled mandatorily. And yet, everybody was concerned about Africa. That Asia will do it, will make it, Europe will make it, North America will make it, Latin America will make it, except Africa. Everybody was concerned. Then my presentation was to say that again, Africa will bring in the solution. Again. Why I'm saying again? Because mankind had gone through many different types of hunger. And then we have to recall that agriculture is very recent compared to the lifetime of mankind. Agriculture is very recent. So for thousands of years, mankind was gathering and hunting. And then when one day many people were dying because they weren't enough, the carrying capacity of the nature was not strong enough to just feed the human population at that time. Many people were dying. Then suddenly came in agriculture, planting. The shift from gathering, hunting to agriculture, we call it a conceptual revolution. It's the main revolution. That's the first conceptual revolution. Now, as agriculture came in, people were producing and population was growing. Suddenly, there's a shift. Suddenly population will start dying. Then we had to go through another conceptual revolution to bring in more food. It was the second conceptual revolution by introducing science and technology. Until now, science and technology has brought us to more than 6.5 billion tons worth of food today. But if you have to multiply 6.52 by 2 within 50 years, we don't have time, we have to go to the third conceptual revolution.